And we're back. Alright, where were we? Oh yeah, the beginning of the Cold War. So right after World War II, the Allies had a lot of work to do. So here's what they did. They established the United Nations in 1945, they expanded their nuclear arsenal, and Germany was split in two by 1949. And Berlin was split by a wall in 1961. West Germany was under control by the West, Britain, France, and the US, and East Germany was under control by the USSR. Berlin was split because the Soviets already managed to take control of East Germany because of the Second World War. They gave half of it to the West because they thought that they would get it back later, which never happened. If you want a detailed reason, Google is free. By this time, the United States was already fearing the spread of communism and they wanted to contain it as much as possible. After the war, the USSR pulled back its relationships with the West, and in 1946, Churchill made the claim that an Iron Curtain has descended upon the European continent. The following year, the Truman Doctrine was signed, and it was basically like, yeah, communism is bad, and we should just make sure it does not spread over here. One of the first conflicts in the Cold War was the Berlin Blockade. The blockade was caused by the USSR's weird logic, and they thought by blocking ground supply routes from West Germany to Western Berlin, they could force the Allies and NATO's to abandon the city. In the end, the USSR stopped the blockade, as it clearly hadn't stopped the Allies to leave the city. Meanwhile, the proxy wars in Korea and Vietnam were happening. This caused the US to panic, and in an effort to contain communism, they directly intervened with the conflicts for freedom! The Korean War was an attempt for North Korea to unite the peninsula under a communist regime and the South under a capitalist regime. They pushed the South Koreans out of Seoul all the way to the port city of Busan, however the United States intervened with the conflict. Eventually, the Korean Armistice Agreement was signed on July 27, 1953, which established a demilitarized zone near the 38th parallel. The Vietnam War played very different than the Korean War. Instead of two professional forces facing off, it was pretty much just the North Vietnamese bullying the South into submission. The US tried to help, but due to pressure back home, they left, which ultimately left the North Vietnamese to win. Cuba in the 1960s would play a very vital role in the near destruction of the entire world. You see, there's this guy, Fulgencio, I don't know how to pronounce his name. You see, there was this guy,
Fulgencio Batista.
He was the former dictator of Cuba, but was overthrown in 1959 by Fidel Castro, who would establish a communist regime right outside the United States' back door of the Caribbean. Safe to say the United States wasn't really happy about this, so they immediately started training exiled counter-revolutionaries from Cuba, which were overseen by the CIA. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Soviets shot down a plane over Cuba, and officers inside a nearby submarine thought that war broke out and began the process to launch a torpedo. However, the authorization needed 3 people, and one man, Vasily, refused to authorize the decision and spare the world from nuclear war. The day before the U.S. planned to invade Cuba, an agreement was made where the U.S. would pull their missiles from Turkey and the Soviets would do the same from Cuba, thus ending the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay, so as much as I want to talk about it, I'll have to save some time and brush over the space race a little bit. The USSR launched the first artificial satellite into space called Sputnik in 1957, and 4 years later they sent up Yuri Gagarin in 1961. The United States landed Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon in 1969, and pretty much just said that they won the space race, even though they didn't really do the other achievements. Mikhail Gorbachev was the last leader of the USSR from 1985 to 1991. Unlike the previous leaders of the Soviet Union, he was a pretty stand-up guy mostly. He decided to make some reforms to better the Union's economic and political stability. However, thanks to these reforms, another man named Boris Yeltsin decided to go behind his back and 3, 2, 1, dissolve the Soviet Union and form the Russian Federation. Okay, it wasn't that quick, but it pretty much was. What really went down was that one by one, each member of the USSR announced that they were exiting from the Union. The last one to leave was Kazakhstan on December 16, 1991. And officially on December 26, 1991, the USSR fell into different nations, and the largest being the Russian Federation. Today, communism in Russia and its former USSR territories has almost completely disappeared. And now in 2024, Russia is fighting a war with Ukraine, and in the Middle East, there's the Israel-Palestine thing going on. And yeah, no, I'm good. I'm not making videos on those. Alright, goodbye. See ya.